Welcome back to our weekly podcast, Design and Destiny, where we're aligning with a power movement of God as we search out how to grow, how to flourish, how to live deeply in God's purposes for our lives so that we can more fully release God's power and glory in the world. And if you're new to the Destiny Makers community and to this podcast, well, I offer a special welcome to you. If you like what you hear today, consider subscribing to our weekly podcast and check us out at destinymakers.org so you can see what we're about and the resources that we have to offer. And in fact, I want to show you today, I don't know if you can all see, I'm wearing my brand new Destiny Makers tank top. We have now opened up a shop on our website, destinymakers.org, where you'll find inspirational t-shirts, hats, accessories, and so on. So check us out if you'd like to wear inspirational kinds of messaging, just to keep your mind daily focused in and conscious and aware of the goodness of God in our lives. So we are now in our second week of looking at the 7 essential steps necessary for all growth and sustainable change to occur. Now, what do I mean by sustainable change? That kind of sounds a little bit like an oxymoron, right? It's not about just attaining the goal. It's about maintaining the outcome after you've reached the goal. For instance, like with a diet, have you ever set a goal to lose 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 50 pounds, whatever? And with enough tenacity and willpower, you can reach that goal. That's not necessarily success, reaching the goal. The success is being able to maintain the behaviors that got you to the goal well after you reached it. In other words, keeping the weight off, right? So we're talking about how do we create change and development that lasts. So if you missed last week's episode, that begins with the dynamics of change and why change often feels so hard, consider pausing this episode, get back to last week's foundational message, and then come on back. And you can find last week's episode. It's archived on our website, destinymakers.org. If you go under the resources tab and scroll down, you'll see it right there. It's the very top one, podcast, Design and Destiny. Now, last week I shared about the fact that most people don't like change. The pollsters, like Gallup, the Gallup polls, the pollsters tell us that change is often uncomfortable to make for most people, and sometimes even unwelcomed when it arrives, even when the change would be a benefit. And I asked the question, if you remember, how about you? How do you respond to change? Whether it's self-induced, as in you set a goal for yourself, or it's been thrust upon you, maybe by, a spouse or a friend or your boss or so on and so forth. So do you find yourself excited with change, diving in deep with arms wide open? Or are you one of those people that you tend to cringe and push back or get stressed and worried about what's required of you and how things will turn out? And as I said in last week's episode, that change is inevitable. I mean, you can't live in this world without encountering change. Change is inevitable. Successful, meaningful, sustainable outcomes or end results are not. So this week, along with the next 6 weeks, I'll be laying out each of the 7 steps. And the first step to change, growth, development is this. There is no motivation to change without the first step of realization. There's no motivation without the first step of realization, recognizing and acknowledging that there's more growth, more opportunity, more areas of your life that require godly refinement through the process of sanctification and the renewing of your mind. And congratulations. I mean, the mere fact that you're even tuned in is evidence that you're a seeker, that you want more, you expect more, that you understand that there's greater purpose and destiny that God has ordained for your life. But have you ever heard or maybe known someone who just doesn't care to grow and develop? I mean, they're perfectly complacent. They have no desire to change. They have no vision for what could be possible or preferable about themselves. I worked with several people like that in organizations around the country. I mean, the leadership invests in building peak performance, and they want higher levels of engagement and highly effective cultures. But the rank and file show up because they have to, not because they want to and they're eager to learn. And it always makes for a very interesting atmosphere until they hear the information about the mind and how it works, and they begin to apply the concepts to some personal part of their life, and then they begin to see results, and then they really start to buy in. And interestingly, some of my biggest opponents in the corporate sector turned out being our best participants who went on to oversee the education and the outcomes for their organization. Now, before we get into some of this, when I talk about realization, recognizing there's more for you, I'm not talking about accumulating more stuff. But I'm also not suggesting that you shouldn't be grateful for who you are, where you are, and what you have. See, you can, and you should, feel full with a grateful heart for where God's led you, and still not be satisfied that He's done with you. So they're not mutually exclusive. So what I'd like to do is I want to give you some key takeaways, in fact, five key takeaways about this first step to all successful change and sustainable growth. The first key takeaway is this, that realization requires faith. Faith in what? Faith in all things possible. God's ideas, His heart, His resources are an endless reservoir. And the scriptures show us this. One instance is when the angel who came to Mary, the mother of Jesus, in the Gospel of Luke. And Mary doesn't understand necessarily what the angel is saying to her about her as a virgin going to be the mother of the Lord and Savior of the world, whose kingdom will have no end. And Mary inquires, how is this possible? I mean, I'm a virgin. And the angel tells her that with God, all things are possible. Or in the Gospels, look at Jesus' encounters with people that He healed. To one, He said, with man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. See, no matter where or what stage you are in life, or what your circumstances are that you're experiencing, it requires hope and trust that God will work all things together for the good of those who love Him and have been called according to His purposes, as it says in Romans 8:28. And it also requires vision to see the picture of the outcome or the destination, the end result. Because without a vision, without a picture of what can be, the people perish. That's Proverbs 29:18. See, when you don't have a picture of what can be, well, you don't grow very much. You don't grow into that extravagant potential that God designed for your destiny. Realization declares, it's not over yet, rather than the person who says, it's just the way I am. I like things just the way they are. I'm set in my ways and I'm too old to change. Or worse yet, things will never change. Why bother? Things can never change, which really is a state of hopelessness. Well, the second key takeaway is this, that not only does realization require faith in all things possible, it also requires staying awake at the gate of your mind, paying attention to what you're saying and being led by the Spirit so that you can discern what God's saying. In other words, you need to have a conscious awareness of your thoughts and behaviors in relation to the goal or to the circumstances you're in, as well as being in tune with God's heart for the situation. And that requires spending time in the presence of God to worship and listen and abide. 400 years before Christ was born, Socrates said, The unexamined life is not worth living. Why? Because if you're not self-examining, there's no sense of meaning or accomplishment or progress. And so your tomorrows look a lot like your todays, and your todays look a lot like your yesterdays, and nothing changes very much in your life. And if you're not growing, you're dying, either physically or spiritually or psychologically or all three. Psalm 139 says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there's any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." Number 3, the third key takeaway is that realization requires believing, having a sense of confidence that you have been given both the potential and the purpose to influence the situation that you're in. But you must believe. You know Henry Ford's saying, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right. See, we've been given potential, power, and purpose, not to relax and retire and rest in our own comforts, but so that we would be co-laborers with Christ, as it says in 1 Corinthians 3:9. See, Jesus came to demonstrate what the kingdom of God looked like. And he told us that when we are to pray, we're to pray, "Thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven." And when he left, he placed the responsibility and accountability on us to carry on his work, as well as equipping us with his spirit of wisdom and power to bring about kingdom transformation. But as long as you and I have breath on this earth, your salvation, my salvation, should lead us toward the restoration of all that Satan has stolen. And you know what? You're fully equipped for your assignment, as I've mentioned so many times before in 2 Peter 1:3. The fourth key takeaway is that realization requires creative imagination and ingenuity. All things new, all things possible is primarily limited in this world by the space between our ears. In other words, the mind. It's only our minds and our lack of imagination that limits this sense of transformation that God has for us and for the world. You know Einstein's definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, except expecting different results. Or maybe you've heard this: if you always do what you've always done, well, you'll always get what you always got. If, as it says in Ephesians 3:20, that our God is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all we ask or imagine, then, if that is true, then we have both the privilege and the opportunity to dream big, to dream outrageously, and then leave the outcomes to God. Those who have made extraordinary discoveries in this world, they've used their amazing capacity to see what others couldn't see. That, horizon beyond the horizon. Well, what about you? What is your exceedingly abundant contribution to this world? What dreams has God put in your heart that require Holy Spirit strategy and creativity and innovation, the genius of your imagination? Well, the fifth key point is that realization is not just a philosophical stance or an intellectual exercise. Realization requires the courage to risk, to act, and to move out. I think probably the best illustrations of this are Jesus' parables, in the parable of the minas and also the parable of the talents. Both illustrate creative, risk-taking action to be fruitful and to multiply what the master had given to each servant. And in both cases, 2 of the 3 servants realized they could produce more. They could create change. Whereas the timid servants in each of those 2 parables, they froze in fear and they hid their possessions and they returned what was given to them. without even interest. But the other servants who tried, they were rewarded for their risk by being given more territory, more authority, more responsibility. You see, until the fear of staying the same, the fear of the mundane, the routine, the familiar, until that fear of staying the same outweighs the fear of change and uncertainty, you'll never change. You'll never move towards change. Why would you? You'd have no desire, no motivation. You don't need it. So a good exercise and a free resource for you is one that I'd like you to try on and see, so that you can see. I'm going to ask you to do this on paper so that you can get a visual of what's subconsciously swirling around in your head. It's called the Destiny Life Wheel. If you go to the website, destinymakers.org, and as I said, you click on the resources tab, you'll see in the drop-down menu, probably about 3 or maybe 4 down, you'll see what says something like free for you. Click on that, and you'll see that there's several resources there, PDF files that are free for you. Feel free to print them all out. But the one in particular, it's probably the 3rd or 4th down, is called the Destiny Life Wheel. Let me show it to you. I've got a copy of it. It looks a little bit like that. Okay. So you can go to destinymakers.org, resources tab, scroll down, and you'll see the Destiny Life Wheel. Print it out. I think this will be a really insightful exercise for you. So here's what I'd like you to do. What you'll see is that I've already pre-labeled this Destiny Life Wheel. And these are my words. They might not necessarily be yours, but what I tried to do is come up with categories that might represent a holistic life. It doesn't mean you're paying attention or even involved in all of these, but it's what might represent a holistic, balanced life. And again, there's nothing miraculous about the words that I used. You might prefer other words. There's nothing that's set in stone with the number of categories. You can add more if you'd like. But here's what I'd like you to do: your own self-assessment on your Destiny Life Wheel to see. Here's what I want you to do is I want you to look at each category. Now, if you take the center dot and give it a value of 0, and at the end of each spoke or each line, a value of 10, with obviously 0 being low and 10 being high, I want you to rate and give yourself a numeric value in each area based on this question. How well are you doing living in the fullness of your God-given potential in each of these areas? So let's say, for instance, family. Well, let's see. How would I be doing with family? Probably pretty well. My brother just moved here to Florida, so I'm so excited to be with him. And we spend a lot of time together. My aunt and uncle also live down here now. And we try to see our son, Nick, in college. And a lot of our family have already passed on. So I would say that I might give myself somewhere up here, like a value of 8. I feel very satisfied. Could we be doing more? I suppose you can always do more. I don't think any area on this wheel would be a complete 10 on this side of life. Let's say fitness. Well, right now I'm going through some challenges with stage 4 breast cancer. We're spending a lot of money doing alternative things that are keeping me alive, but they're not covered by insurance. I'm currently kind of been dealing with a lot of nausea. It's been hard to eat. I'm taking a lot of pills. And so I would probably give myself a 5 in fitness, because I declare that I'm healed, but my body has not yet caught up with what my mind and my spirit know to be true. So so I might give myself, a 5, which would be represented as halfway. So you do the same thing. Go around each category and ask yourself from 0 to 10, with 0 being low and 10 being high, what value would you give, numeric value? And you might want to, instead of writing the number, what will really help and really be a strong visual would be if you either draw a line to represent it, or even better yet, shade it in. Because what you'll see is that your Destiny Life Wheel probably isn't particularly balanced. And it will give you a visual of the areas of your life that perhaps you've been neglecting in terms of pursuing growth and development. So that's for you. And you'll find this to be very helpful as we move on in the ensuing weeks when I get into the other 6 steps necessary for all change and growth. So again, the Destiny Life Wheel, a free resource for you. St. Augustine said this: do not be content with what you are if you want to become what you are not yet. For where you have grown pleased with yourself, there you shall remain. So come on back next week, where we'll discuss the second step to all meaningful, sustainable growth and development. Have a blessed week. See you soon.